We talk a lot on this show and this network about Republicans and Democrats and support for the Second Amendment. But of course, there are third parties to consider as well. Our next guest writes for the Libertarian Republic, and he recently posted about the Second Amendment. His name is Ram, and he joins us today. What's going on, Ram?
I'm doing well. I apologize for my attire. I actually just came back from the gym. How are you?
Dude, do you see what I'm wearing? You're good, man. You're good. No, this is on CNN Live. We come as we are. So.
Oh yeah, good.
Absolutely. So tell us, generally speaking, how do libertarians compare to Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah. So I mean, just generally, I would say that I do not consider myself conservative or a liberal. So I mean, generally, in brevity, what the libertarian perspective is: if you're not screwing with me, if you're not disrupting my agency, what I do, then you should theoretically be able to do whatever you want. So at the end of the day, we should take as little from other people by force as possible. That includes taxes, other things of that regard. And if you're doing something, regardless how upsetting or heinous or awful I think it is, if it's not directly affecting me, my agency, my safety, my security, there should be no reason why the government bans its existence. And I think that guns definitely fall into this category.
Now, how far does that effects plane go? So is it only directly affecting, or is there any room for indirect actions that may result in something that harms you? Keep in mind I'm playing devil's advocate here because I pretty much know.
Yeah, sure. So obviously there's a lot of nuance to it. I mean, like you can theoretically string, like, the butterfly effect. The butterfly flaps its wings, and and infinitely many events ensue, and a hurricane happens. You can theoretically string an infinite amount of events and say, well, these two things are indirectly correlated in some capacity, right?
Absolutely.
So it's very hard to draw a line in the sand saying that, hey, this is where you are causing me problems, therefore it should be banned by the government.
Gotcha. But what is safe to say is it's usually looked upon through the filter of, as long as it's not affecting me in a negative way, I'm generally going to stay out of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, George Washington said himself, like, as soon as he got into office, if I recall, he was like, political parties will, they will spell the death of this nation. And, like, I completely agree, because nowadays, like, I've been privileged to attend one of the best universities in the world. And you go outside, you go into a conservative space, and you say that I hold some liberal ideas, even though on average I consider myself a conservative. Yeah. You're a pariah. They hate you. They're like, oh, no, you don't have allegiance to my party. You don't agree with absolutely 100% of everything that I say. And I mean, contrary to popular opinion, you can have opposing ideologies and still be friends and, still, get along. I have friends who are conservatives. I have friends who are left-wing liberals. I keep telling them that there's no sense in raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Take an Econ 101 class. It gets heated sometimes. But I mean, at the end of the day, that having different political ideologies should not influence anything else beyond that, and libertarianism, generally speaking, there are obviously a lot of nuances to it, but it is socially left-wing and fiscally right-wing in regards. Absolutely.
So now, how do you think the kind of more dogmatic aspects of our political separation, so to speak, how do you think that plays a part in terms of the Second Amendment? Do you think that helps it or it hurts it?
I think it definitely hurts it. So, I mean, just generally, if you go around, like, say, any educated space that has both liberals and conservatives, a few third-party people going around, and you say that I am a proponent of gun rights. Yeah. Well, a lot of left-wing people will say, well, that means you're complicit in the deaths of millions. You're complicit in the mass murder of children. And, like, what the hell is that? That is absolute. That logic is absolutely incomprehensibly bullshit. There's nothing you could possibly say to that. At the end of the day, nobody wants any of these tragedies to happen. Absolutely. It's not like people who are working for the NRA or gun rights proponents. Like, for instance, I don't know a damn worth of anything about guns. I don't have guns. No one in my family has guns. But I still think that they are necessary and they're critical for a free state. But at the end of the day, I don't know anything about weapons. But, I mean, these people, they say that, well, because you support gun rights, that means that you support everything that all guns do. Yeah. That is an incongruent logical leap. You can't make that assumption. So, a lot of the things that people say, like in retort, they say that in a modern society, in a good, free society, there's no reason to have guns. And that is true, but that's not the purpose of the Second Amendment. The purpose of the Second Amendment is to prevent that badness from happening in the first place, right? Yeah. It's not like people in Venezuela today are like, oh shit, I wish I had guns. We wouldn't be rotting in this socialist, dictatorship we have right now. Like Stalin, he took away guns. Hitler, he took away guns. He did that because when they rose to power, there'd be no means of revolt. Like Goebbels, his right-hand man, the master propaganda strategist, they played this enormous game of keeping the vast majority of the public completely unaware of the atrocities that they were committing against the Jewish people. And, taking away the means that you have to fight against tyranny, I think, falls into that boat. And, I don't like Trump very much, but I can't say that when people say that he's a fascist or that he's akin to Hitler, I think that is extraordinarily offensive. To people who have actually gone through the Holocaust and who have actually experienced what fascism is capable of doing. It's not like Hitler is going, or Trump is going up and rounding up tens of millions of people and executing them on the street. Once he starts doing that, then you can call him a fascist or call him Hitler.
Here's the irony behind that. Even if he wanted to, we live in a society that has the Second Amendment, which essentially prohibits that ability for him to do that.
So the thing is, so back to what you said originally, like I personally, I don't agree with everything the NRA does either, right? I know that the NRA lobby has consistently blocked the government from doing research into guns, the CDC from doing research into guns. And I personally disagree with that. I think that freedom of information, I think that it is good to know of guns, to what extent they could correlate with damage. But like I say in my piece, that shouldn't matter, right? Having a car is way more dangerous than not having a car, but they're not illegal because when you weigh the positives and negatives of having a car, you realize that statistically it's way more practical to have a car than to not have a car, right? If you have to travel for work, etc. So I mean, if for instance,
so let's go. No, you're good. So let's talk about the CDC aspect really quickly. Just from my understanding, I think it was more so that the kind of leaking of impartiality that comes with something that's supposed to be objective in terms of research, right? I think in many ways the individual who was heading the CDC at the time, who was purporting to engage in this type of research, had already kind of demonstrated leanings that were inherently anti. And so there's always going to be a concern there with respect to who's conducting this research, because I'm pretty sure you're aware of there's so many variables and things that you have to account for. And it's very easy to manipulate findings. I'm pretty sure you could have a stat for something and I can have a stat that counters that, and we're technically right in a sense, but at the same time, there are so many other variables that are not accounted for with respect to that. And so I think that was the concern there in terms of kind of, go ahead, say it again.
Yeah, so I said, may I respond to that though?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so having done lots of scientific research, it's not like one published paper results in some insurmounting change that affects everything. It has to go through a very rigorous peer review process whereby, different researchers who have conducted independent experiments regarding the same topic have corroborated your findings. And if that happens to a massive degree, then only does it supplant the current paradigm. So in research, if one person comes up with a theory that says that something is bad, something is awful, it's not just instantaneously going to take root in the scientific community. And speaking as a mathematician, one paper doesn't destabilize anything. You can't just say that, and that's precisely because of what you just said, is because of bias. They realize that a researcher might be biased, but in my opinion, that shouldn't mean that the research shouldn't take place. You see, like I said, because I strongly believe that even if people were to say that having a gun in your home is more dangerous than not having a gun, I still think that guns should be legal. I still think that the Second Amendment is critical for the reasons that I said before. And I mean, just generally, one of the arguments that brilliant minds like Richard Dawkins, Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson, they say that they don't like the Conservative Party because they, at least in a modern sense, they appear to be an anti-science type party. There a lot of people with prominent positions in the GOP still believe in creationism. They believe that the Earth is 6,000 years old. Even if you live under a rock, then you should know that the Earth is more than 6,000 years old. I mean, even in that case, the aphorism doesn't hold, because if you know anything about geology, you would still see that the Earth is more than 6,000 years old. But I mean,
but I'm gonna pause right there, because there's a lot to unpackage in what you said, right? So I'm gonna bring you back slightly. So with respect to academia, you're right. providing a study, one study doesn't usurp everything, right? So
Yeah.
within the context of academia, within the science world, that I'll give you. However, we have to understand how stats and research is now on the mainstream has essentially become weaponized. Yeah.
No,
so yeah. So I think the concern there stems from, okay, this comes out under the CDC brand, right? And of course, it may be countered by numerous of other studies. The problem is you have a group of people on one side who would take that, and they have a platform that they essentially run. I call it the mainstream media for all intents and purposes. And they use that and they put that out there as the authoritative figure. And so once that happens, when we're talking about something like the gun culture, which largely directs where we go from a political standpoint, it can become incredibly dangerous when you don't have a narrative that has the same platform to counter that study. Because the vast majority of people aren't going to look at the counter studies that take place because they largely exist in the microcosm of academia.
Well, I mean, you could easily flip that and point to Republicans who don't believe in climate change, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, like the vast, and when I say vast, I mean the overwhelming consensus in the STEM community is that climate change is real, it is deleterious to the environment, and it is exacerbated by human activity. And I believe that. Actually, you know, that's not even the right word. I know that that's true because belief implies an element of faith. Right, and you know that's because they cherry pick the GOP party. They cherry pick these 5 studies that say that climate change isn't real or whatever, and then they say that these are the authoritative stats that contrast against everything.
But let me ask you this one question as a whole,
yeah.
and not to go into the mud in terms of climate control and climate change and so forth and so on, but on the surface level, how many people can you honestly say are aware of those 5 particular studies?
Well, I mean,
outside of the Conservative Party, and then bring it into the mainstream platform. How many people are actually aware of that? Because it kind of goes to my point.
With regard to climate change?
Go ahead.
With regard to climate change?
Yes.
Well, I mean, the people who denounce climate change as being false or fake are outside of the STEM community. Like, it's akin to, like, you know, when I talk to a super left-wing person, and they say that the minimum wage should be raised to $15 an hour, I tell them, well, if you, as a person with a quantitative finance background or even a basic understanding of remedial economics, if you introduce a price floor that high, you will price out a massive amount of people from the job market. There'll be a tremendous increase in unemployment. But the thing is that desire is born of their not wanting to see people in poverty. So the intent is good, but because of their lack of knowledge, they don't want to do it. And it's similar with the Republican ideology with regard to climate change because they don't want to put millions of people out of work, right? You don't want to tell people who've been working in the coal industry or in big oil their whole lives that, hey, look, what you're doing is suddenly obsolete and doesn't matter anymore. But the thing is, with the libertarian perspective, everything is controlled by the free market, by capitalism. And currently, Bloomberg has actually released many studies with this regard. Regardless of the power of the oil lobby, or, you know, telling people that climate change is false, that it's bad. The market forces are so strong that companies are still pushing towards wind and solar. Like even Aramco in Saudi Arabia, they're building a massive contingent of solar and wind things because they see these market forces. They see that people are pushing towards green energies. And the people who are saying that climate change is fake, these are the people who are championing these 5 studies, and all of their constituents are like, "Hey, look at these 5 studies." Right?
Okay. So I'm gonna pause because we're kind of going way left field here, and I got sucked in because my mind would just go wherever it goes.
Absolutely. So we can go back to guns now.
But no, you know, we're so out of time. It's not even funny. I'm probably going to get yelled at after this, but it doesn't matter. Okay. But no, I really appreciate it, Rom. But no, please come back and join us so we can continue this conversation even further. Probably should have had you on for a lot longer.
Absolutely, sounds good. The next time I come back online, I'll talk exclusively about guns.
No, you're good, man. All right, you have a good one, man.
Yeah, you too.
All right. All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we'll be checking out some pistol caliber carbines from Flint River Armory.